A couple years ago, I decided that I really wanted to go camp by myself somewhere along the Appalachian Trail. And it was getting close to my birthday, and my wife said, "Hey, you know what? Your birthday present is this year. You can go off for a day and you can go do what you want in camp. And that's your gift." And I was like, okay. So, I knew this was coming up, and I had already been getting some equipment, and I got a 511 72 uh, 511 72 pack, I guess is what the bag is called. It's a big bag. It's meant to be able to stuff with enough stuff to survive for 72 hours. And maybe it's a 511 72-hour bag. But anyways, so that was my bag that I got, and I was working at the NSSF at the time, so I was able to actually supplement a lot of the gear because it was all kind of like hunting gear type stuff. Like that bag was, technically a hunting bag or a range bag. And then there was a lot of other things I got, like a camp stove and the fuel cells for that and compasses. And then, there was medical kits and flashlights and, all the stuff that I needed. Then I got food. I got just, food that I could create, that was dried food that I added a little water to create while I was out camping. And I packed everything together, and this bag was, oh my gosh, it was so heavy. But I had 2 water bottles. I had a canteen, and then I also had a full water bottle. But I had this thing packed to the brim. This was heavy. I think the bag weighed about 55 pounds or something like that. It was heavy. And I was like, all right, so here we go. So incidentally, I was working at the NSSF, and I used to go to shotgun tournaments to go compete with them, with some of the other people from the NSSF. And I had this competition that morning. I left on a Friday. It was like Friday morning I left, and I brought my bag, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go up to northwestern Connecticut where the Appalachian Trail is. But I had to drive into New York first, so I drove across the border to, I forget what the name of the club was, but I did the shotgun competition, which is a little exhausting. I think, it's not very it's not very it's not very physical. It's not like you have to do a lot of that, but you are walking, but you're shooting, and that can actually cause some discomfort or pain in your shoulder because you're shooting shotguns, and there's a kickback in every time you shoot the shotgun. So anyways, my shoulder was a little bit hurt, but I said, I finished that competition. It was probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I finished, and I'm like, all right, so I'm heading from here up to that place, which was another 45 minutes away. But I got in the car, and I also was kind of gauging because it looked like it might storm, and I was trying to figure out, what was gonna happen. And I was seeing all different weather forecasts, but I also, was seeing that the temperature was gonna kind of drop, and this was in April in Connecticut, and it was generally 65, maybe 60 degrees. It wasn't gonna be too cold. I mean, I wasn't wearing just a t-shirt and shorts or anything like that, but I was just kind of dressed in a light long sleeve shirt and some jeans, and I had some shoes that I had actually just bought. These trail shoes, which were great, but I didn't have winter gear or anything like that. So I go off and I hike, and I had kind of a light jacket, and I start going, and my plan was, I'm gonna go hike, for hours and then set up camp. But I quickly realized that this is going to be a little bit harder than I thought, and so I just planned to get to this campsite that was off of the Appalachian Trail that was specifically, set up for camping. So I get out on the trail, and I'm hiking and hiking, and I'm saying to myself, oh my gosh, like this pack is so heavy, and I'm not in shape for this. this is just nuts. But I just was like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. At the very least, I need to get to this campsite, because that was kind of the plan. And there was only 2 campsites along the trail from where I was going that was near enough to me and all the way up to the Massachusetts border. But I basically was like, okay, I'm going. This is where I'm going. So I actually had this app where it was an offline trail map that I programmed in where I needed to go, and I'm kind of watching it, and I'm like getting to the point where I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna die, because this 55-pound pack was just so much heavier than I was anticipating. But I hike and I hike and I hike, and I get to this campsite, and I'm just relieved. And it was a little chilly, but I'm like, and there was kind of a breeze, and it was right next to a stream. But they had all these pallets. They look like pallets, but they were basically raised platforms for tents. And I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go set up one of these. But they also often have these kind of lean-tos that they have for the people who are more of the die-hard hikers that are doing the Appalachian Trail, who don't carry tents with them. And I did carry a tent. Part of the reason why my bag was so heavy, but I just had my sleeping bag and my tent, and I'm walking up towards this lean-to thing just because I wanted to see what it looked like, and I got startled because there was a guy in there, and this guy kind of pops up and he's like, hey, how's it going? And like, he had a really severe stutter, and he was hard to understand, but I got out of him that his name was Stickers, or he was called Snickers. He didn't tell me a real name, and that he was recently released from prison and wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. So he had been hiking it for several days, and he had picked it up in New York, I think it was. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is kind of nuts. Nuts because I'm in the middle of the woods, and there's a man named Snickers who just got out of jail. And I'm thinking, so this is how I die. Okay. I didn't see this coming. But, I said, well, I'm going to do everything I can to not die tonight, because nobody wants to die. And I said to the guy, well, I'm going to go set up camp down there on one of those platforms. I got a tent. He's like, oh, you're not sleeping in this little hut thing with me? And I was like, no, I'm good. I got a tent, and I just got it. I want to try it out. So I said, I'm going to go set up. So he's like, okay. And so then I go down, and I get my tent staked out and set up, and he appears behind me. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? He's like, I just came to see, how things are going. And he was, stuttering so bad. And I felt bad because I was really, really trying to pay attention to him and listen to him, and not come across as I was freaked out in any manner. I mean, I was not super freaked out or anything. I wasn't scared, but not just because it might come across as rude, but also, I didn't want to show fear, because I think, that can be smelled or something. I heard, especially in the woods, especially if he's some kind of crazy hunter type serial killer. But anyway, so I was just going about my business and setting up the tent, and he was talking to me and telling me how he always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, and took the opportunity once he got out of prison, and he was set up and was going to be heading out. And I was like, well, that's cool. I was like, I'm tired. I just said, I'm really tired, and I'm just going to settle in, because I've been hiking all day, which was not true. I'd been hiking for only about 2.5 to 3 hours, maybe 3 hours. It wasn't that far, but, he's like, well, I got a sandwich from the store, so I'm going to go eat my sandwich. I said, okay, you go eat your sandwich. So I then get into my tent, and I start kind of settling in and figuring out what I'm going to do. And I start realizing it's getting cooler as the sun was going down, starting to go down. and then I'm starting to kind of do an inventory of my pack and just making sure I had everything I thought I should have, and I started debating whether I should eat some of the dried tuna that I had I just had to mix with water, or if I should boil some water and make some chicken noodle soup, because I had another dried pack of that, and I was trying to figure that stuff out. And then also, surprisingly, had cell phone reception, so I was checking on my phone, and I was seeing that they were estimating that the temperature was going to get down into the teens that night, and I started to think, uh-oh, like I had an extra shirt, but I didn't have extra socks or extra long johns or anything like that to keep myself from getting too cold. So then I started kind of freaking out, but I was like, well, I guess I'll have to figure this out. And then I get out of my tent again, and because I decided I was going to go fill my water bottle at the stream and try out my new, I think they're ionizer pills or whatever the heck tablets. They're cleansing tablets that you mix in your water, and after a certain amount of time the water's clear and good to go. And so I get out of the tent, and I've got my canteen, and there's Snickers again. And he's like, you eating dinner? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, yeah. I've been snacking on some trail mix and beef jerky. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, well, I ate my sandwich, and I was like, okay, that's good. And then he gave me some actually really good advice, because he says, it's going to get cold tonight. And for a second, I thought he better not suggest that we, put our bodies together for warmth or anything crazy like that. But he actually said, there's a trick. You can actually put your feet in your pack, and it's another way to keep your feet warm. He's like, and if you keep your feet warm, it'll generally keep the rest of your body warm. He's like, you protect the heat from leaving your feet, and then, if you wear a hat or you got your sleeping bag with the hood of it, and you keep your head inside the hood, it'll keep your heat basically within your sleeping bag. And I said, well, thanks, that's great advice. And he said, well, he's like, I'm gonna probably turn in a little bit, and I said, yeah, I'll probably do the same. And he kind of walked off, and I was like, okay, maybe I won't die tonight. He won't kill me. So I went to the stream, and I filled up my water bottle and did my little tablets in there, mixed it up, and then waited the allotted amount of time I was supposed to, and then tasted it and drank it and didn't die of dysentery or anything. And I was like, cool, I'm learning this camping stuff. I wasn't in Boy Scouts growing up, so this was all kind of new to me. But I had no idea what was in store, because speaking of the Boy Scouts, because I got back in and I started to get settled in, and I had a book, and I set up my flashlight, and I was reading a book, and I was just kind of hanging out. And then all of a sudden I hear a ton of little voices, and then some louder voices, it sounded like kids and adults, and I'm thinking, oh, someone else is coming through to go camping tonight. I was like, okay, good, at least there'll be someone else that might make my chances 50-50 if I'm going to get murdered. Snickers has to choose one or the other. But I'm like, okay, so this kind of could work out. And I start hearing more and more and more and more voices, and I'm starting to think, what the heck is going on? And then they're all around me, and they're in every direction, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I pop my head out, and I look, and it's an entire Boy Scout troop, and there was a couple chaperones or Boy Scout leaders with this whole troop. And I'm just thinking to myself, of course this would happen. This was a peaceful experience for 5 minutes, and this whole troop, so I kind of popped my head out, I just waved to a couple of the leaders, and then I got back in my tent, and then it was just insaneness. It was kids and laughing and running around, and then they were all setting up their gear, and then they all had to eat. But then you could hear the Boy Scout leaders giving their, sage advice about hanging the bags of food. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I got my feet inside of a bag, and I've got a bunch of food in the bag because, I packed way more food than I really needed for an overnight trip. And I had all this beef jerky and trail mix, and I think I had some kind of sugar candies or something, Twizzlers or something like that. But all this food that was just sitting in this bag, and I'm thinking, this isn't going to be good because I'm basically going to attract a bear that's going to eat a whole bunch of Boy Scouts, and it's going to be my fault because I didn't follow the Boy Scout rules and hang my pack from a tree a good distance away from where I was sleeping. But I just said, what are the chances, So I laid there and, I was reading, mostly listening to all the chaos that was going around. And then it started to get darker, and then they all kind of got a little bit quieter. But there was a tent that was set up. There was these two kids that were sleeping somewhat next to me. I mean, I have to imagine, because I didn't actually look out of the tent to see how close they were, but they sounded like their tent was literally right next to my tent. And I just remember thinking to myself, of course this would happen, This is just good luck, right? And I'm just trying to kind of concentrate, but I couldn't help but overhear some of, the weird conversations. And these were all boys that were probably, I want to guess between 14 and 16 years old. And, they're curious conversations that they were having. And, I remember I overheard something that these two kids were just talking, and one of the kids says to the other kid, he goes, hey, I got a question for you. And the other one's like, what? And he's like, do you ever dream of penises? And the other kid has said, wait, what? He's like, nothing, never mind. And then the conversation kind of went back and forth about, wait, did you say what you said, what I think you said? And he's like, no, I didn't mean it. I'm asking for a friend. It's like, if you ever just dream of that. And I'm just sitting there I wish I was recording this or something, because this was just the most bizarre and hysterical conversation. And it was really, really twisted because, I don't know what was transpiring inside that tent with, this conversation, and what the expression on the other kid's face was. But then, then it became this conversation that turned into, I need to prove how masculine I am, and all, it was just very interesting. I guess the evolution of a conversation between two teens, where it went from awkward to trying to cover up for being awkward. But, that was just a highlight of the evening entertainment, apparently. And so then finally it started to get quiet, and I actually started to settle in, but it started to get cold. So then I was really just okay, I just need to survive the night because I'm starting to actually get cold. And I was in a sleeping bag that was actually rated for 30 degrees, and I'm kicking myself for not getting the 0 degree bag. Also, I didn't have a camp pad, which is a way to help insulate underneath you, because I was sitting on a platform that was raised up, so the draft of the air that was just blowing off of the stream and through the woods was just kind of kicking up underneath this thing. And so that was also part of the problem, which was just cooling me off, and it was making it cold. But I managed to go to sleep because I think I finally got to a point where everything was my temperature was just kind of regulating inside the bag, and I was pretty much zipped all the way up with just a little bit of my face sticking out. And I finally fell asleep. And then I start, I'm having a dream, and in the middle of a dream, I'm dreaming of getting yanked out of my tent by a bear. But then I heard a loud rustling or something knocking at the edge of my tent. It was I had paws or something, and I just jumped up, and immediately I thought, that's the bear. It's there. It's coming for me. Then, I thought about it, and I'm like, that had to have been a raccoon or something, but there was definitely something. And I immediately grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the bag, and looked out and looked all around, and I'm looking, at all angles and just trying to see, and it was some kind of animal, but I don't know what it was. But then I said, I don't care if my feet get frostbite. I'd rather that than get eaten by a bear. So I just threw my shoes on, grabbed my pack with all the food in it, and I took out a couple essential items, and then I just ran over, and there was a bear box that was across the stream. It was probably 300 feet away from me, and I just ran over there and I dropped the backpack in that box, and then went back to my tent. And then I was actually able to fall asleep, and I actually slept. I mean, I woke up a couple of times in the middle of the night because it was cold, but I was able to fall back to sleep. And then it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and then the whole Boy Scout troop had to pack up and take off. So then it was them basically packing up to take off, but I just kind of laid around, and it was about, I guess that was about 6 o'clock in the morning, so it was probably about 7:30. Eventually, I think the groups kind of split off for their different areas, but I just kind of hung out and just waited for them to leave. I'm like, this is already as embarrassing as it was. And then I got up at one point, and there was still a group of people left, and they were eating around the little camp stove. They were eating because you couldn't actually have open flames out there. You couldn't have a fire going on that trail, so you had to have camp stoves or something. But they were all eating, and I kind of awkwardly ran by them, waved, got my bag from the box, and I went back. And then I proceeded to just pack up and settle out, like get everything ready to go. But I waited, and as soon as they all took off, then I looked around and I saw there was nobody, even Snickers. Snickers he might have taken off in the middle of the night because he thought it was nuts that there was 50 kids standing there all of a sudden. But when he was talking about how he loves the peacefulness of this whole thing, so I feel bad for Snickers. He may have wanted to kill me, but he didn't. He did have a right. He was entitled to his peace and quiet, which he was robbed of. But anyways, I packed up, and then I took off, and I headed back on my way. And it was a interesting night, and I figured I'd share that story because that was just another one of those weird moments in history. All right. Thanks for listening.